This week we are discussing Sam Dalrymple's book Shattered Lands, which talks about the different partitions that the British India went through. When we talk about partition, as I said in the previous episode, we mostly focus on India Pakistan partition. But the British India, as it existed back then, it spanned the region beyond current India and Pakistan. There were the Gulf states, there was Burma in the east, so quite a few entities were there. And in the previous episode, we also discussed how in 1937, how Burma got partitioned from British India, and at the same time, the Gulf states, countries like Yemen, they became separate entities. Before that, they used to be a part of this combined British India, and even the passport that existed back then for British India, it used to confer that single identity to all those places, whether it was Dubai or Qatar or Bahrain, Yemen, India, Pakistan, Bangladesh, Nepal, Bhutan, till Burma. So it was quite a big unit. And then came 1940s when the region had got smaller. The British India in 1940s, Burma was separate, Gulf states were separate, and then we had what we currently now see as India, Pakistan, Bangladesh, even Nepal and Bhutan. But then tensions were rising. As we had already discussed, there were religious tensions between Hindus and Muslims, and on top of that, the leadership, the Hindus were mostly represented by Congress, and Muslims, they were represented by the Muslim League. In the leadership of these two parties, there was this tussle going on. Gandhi or Nehru, they were on Congress side, Jinnah was leading the Muslim League, and these leaders were not really getting along with each other. And it was also the time, 1940s that is, when the Second World War was going on. And a lot of Congress leaders, they were in jail because they had started this Quit India movement. They were a part of it. And a lot of Britishers, the British authorities, they were making sure that these leaders stayed either in house arrest or in the jails and didn't get a chance to incite the general public to cause more disruptions. So they were in the jails most of the time. On the other hand, this was probably the best time for the Muslim League because most of the Congress leadership was in jail. The Muslim League had the opportunity to go into the public and make sure that their message was conveyed. So then the Jinnah's Pakistan demand, it was now furiously debated in almost every household across India, especially we're talking about the Muslim households here. The Muslim League itself, the party had exploded in size, its popularity had really grown. And this also meant because the politics was being played along the communal lines, it meant that the atmosphere in the country was really tensed. There was a lot of polarization, a lot of riots, they were taking place, violence was taking place. So there was a lot of tension in the air at that time. And so after the World War, when British had kind of made up their mind that they are going to leave India, they started working towards it. And the then Viceroy, Lord Mountbatten, he had got a lot of responsibility on his shoulders for that. When he came to India, he was a bit reluctant earlier while he was coming to India. But then when he got here, he started to familiarize himself with the leadership, with the general public. He traveled a lot, met a lot of leaders. Eventually, he got really close with Nehru, who was the Congress leader at the time. And he was not really as close to Jinnah. And you can see there were certain differences between them. In fact, Nehru was also close to Mountbatten's wife, and that's another story that I'll talk about later. First, let's come to the question of partition. Now, when this question was being discussed across India that Muslims of the Indian subcontinent should have a separate homeland, then there were a lot of other points that came up. For example, if Muslims were supposed to get their homeland or a separate country for themselves, what about Sikhs? Should there be another homeland for Sikhs or Sikhistan or Khalistan? What about Bengalis, which is not a religious identity but ethnic or a cultural identity? Should there be a Bengalistan? What about Pashtuns? Should there be a Pashtunistan? So all these questions were being debated. So one hand, this was the idea that, okay, you have one group and they should have their own country. On the other hand, the Congress had the idea that, sure, this is going to be a Hindu majority country, but all other religions, they will feel safe and they all can live here. So that was more diverse idea in that sense. A lot of times these days you'll find this question being raised. A lot of times people ask, especially from the Hindu right, that if Muslims got their own homeland, shouldn't Hindus have got their own country and India should be a Hindu country? And the question doesn't really make sense, because if you see how things were panning out back then, if India became a Hindu only country, it wouldn't be the same as it is today, because then Sikhs wouldn't be there, many Christians from the northeast, they wouldn't join. So that way, India in its current shape could only come into existence because it was supposed to be a diverse idea, and that's what the leadership at the time, they thought about it. But as I said, it was not really easy. Everybody now that's observing that Pakistan demands, they were getting louder. Everybody else thought that maybe they should get their own country. Bengalis thought they should have their country. Kashmiris thought they should have their country. So a lot of chaos was there at the time. And then something interesting happened in 1946. So far, Muhammad Ali Jinnah was demanding a separate nation of Pakistan. But then there was this cabinet mission plan, according to which Hindus and Muslims, they could have their separate regions, but in the end it could have been one country still. And in June 1946, Jinnah agreed to this, and he agreed that he would take Pakistan in name, but it will exist within the framework of an undivided country. So there was this, even until 1946, just 1 year before the partition, the possibility of a single independent India. But right then, Congress does something, and both Nehru and Gandhi, they insisted that the Northwest Frontier Province, which in today's terms is a province in Pakistan, Khyber Pakhtunkhwa, it was at the time dominated by Congress, and by all arrangements, because of its geography, because its demography, it was supposed to be a part of Pakistan. But they didn't agree to that, and they wanted it to be a part of India, not Pakistan. And that's where Jinnah felt that this was a kind of a betrayal, and the cabinet mission plan, which was almost going to succeed, it failed right there. What that meant? That meant that partition was inevitable. And not just inevitable, but it was going to happen in the most horrific way. And that's when, 2 months later, on 16th August, Jinnah called for Direct Action Day. And what he meant by that, he said, in fact, that its aim was to establish either a divided India or a destroyed India. And there began all the violence. So far, whatever was going on was between the leaders and it was taking place at the negotiating tables. Now it was going to take place in the streets, and so many protesters and workers of Muslim League, they came out, and there began the riots, especially in the city of Calcutta. In fact, in many parts of Bengal, because remember, Bengal was a Muslim majority province. Calcutta was a city where significant population of both Hindus and Muslims existed, and both wanted to claim the city. And that's where the violence really started. One name that is interesting in all the drama that was unfolding there is that of Mujibur Rahman, who was later going to found Bangladesh. But at that time, he was really going for the creation of Pakistan. He was a student back then who was actively participating in politics, and he, along with other members of Muslim League, they went around and participated in all the protests, all the violence that was taking place. And as it happens with a lot of such violent activities, they just spread. And in the single night, this small fight, or rather violence that was restricted to certain areas, it had transformed into full-on ethnic cleansing. And the two sides, Hindus and Muslims, they were after each other. A lot of violence took place. So many people, innocent people, died. This is what Mujib wrote. He said, anyone seen in the streets after dusk would be shot at sight. The army usually would leave the person they had shot on the streets. They would aim their guns at every open window. In the morning, we would see many dead people on the road. So the allegation was that because this was a province ruled by the Muslim League, the whole apparatus, state apparatus, security agencies, they were also allowing it to happen, and Muslims were really going after the Hindus. But at the same time, the violence was going both ways. Hindus were killing Muslims, Muslims were killing Hindus. And eventually so many people died. In fact, 10% of Calcutta had fled the city. When the things calmed down, when Nehru visited the city, he got to talk to a lot of people there, and so many stories emerged. Eventually, the more stories emerged, the more people realized that they had just given in to the violence, to the circumstances. And when such things happen, the worst sides of human behavior, they come out, the worst instincts. And that's what had happened there. Even Gandhi, when he came there, it was interesting how Mujibur Rahman, he described Mahatma Gandhi. He was quite amazed, and he said that how in Gandhi's presence the whole atmosphere changed, and described him as a magician. So Gandhi's following was still there. It wasn't really as big as it used to be earlier, but it was still there. People still listened to him, and he had the kind of authority over masses that very few people have had in Indian history. And then once these riots, this violence calmed down in this region, another wave of violence that started now on the other side of the map towards Punjab. So what happened there was this Sikh leader, Master Tara Singh, and he said that a motherland is calling for blood, and will finish the Muslim League. And after that, the violence erupted. It was started by Muslim mobs in the Sikh villages in near today's Rawalpindi or Islamabad, that region. And it was horrible. Somewhere around 100,000 men, they had come from a district with guns and with other weapons, and they started their uh, kind of a military campaign, because most of them, they were ex-military men. So they came on horseback, armed with guns, pistols, rifles, hatchets, and all those things, and then they kind of wiped out a major portion of Sikh population there. In the middle of all this violence, you also get to hear the stories of humanity. For example, when this all this violence was taking place, when Muslim mobs were attacking those Sikhs, there were some Muslims who were trying to protect those Sikhs. And as you see the story of Jews in the Holocaust, some people were trying to protect Jews, and the same was happening there. That some people were trying to protect the families they had known for years. But eventually, when the stories came out to the east of Punjab and to even Delhi, the riots started in these parts also. And Hindus and Sikhs, their mobs went after the Muslims. And once again, you hear their stories. One side, the mobs are going after a particular religion, but then there are certain individuals or families who are trying to protect their neighbors whom they've known for many years or even generations. And in all of this, all the violence that was going on, the important task was still left, which was the partition. India still had to be divided into two countries, India and Pakistan. How it was going to happen, what was going to happen to the population, how the maps were going to look like, nobody knew. And this was Mountbatten's job. And as I told you earlier, he and his wife Edwina, they traveled to India, and they took notice of the situation. They met different leaders and kept working on the partition plan. But you have to remember, compare this to the other partitions that have happened so far. For example, Gulf states, they were partitioned from the British India. Burma, that was partitioned from British India. These partitions were slow, and they were done over a long period of time through deliberations, negotiations. There was a lot of time. So hence, there was not as much violence involved as it was happening here. In this case, the British authorities, they seemed to be in a hurry, and they wanted to leave as quickly as possible, which meant there was going to be a lot of chaos in India. But it wasn't really these, there were not just two parties, India and Pakistan. There were so many princely states who did not want to become a part of either India or Pakistan. And that made situation even more complicated. And those were big princely states, really big. Some of them were of the sizes of certain European countries. What to do with them? Some of these states wanted a separate nation. For example, Bhopal, it wanted these some of these princely states around western or central India to unite and create a third dominion called Rajasthan. And that just increased the work for Mountbatten. And in all of this, there comes the story of Nehru and Edwina. Pretty much everybody, every historian has noticed that these two had grown really close. There was definitely romance going on. So while Nehru was close to Mountbatten, he was also close to his wife. In fact, he was having an affair with her. But at the same time, he was good friends with Mountbatten, and the two of them, they were negotiating and deliberating on this idea of partition and how to work it out, how to work with the princely states, what to do with them. Then there was the question of the partition of Punjab and Bengal as well. As I told you, both Hindus and Muslims, they wanted the city of Calcutta. At the same time, both would have liked to keep the city of Lahore. And it was really difficult because partitioning certain areas entirely, let's say partitioning the Burmese population or partitioning Pathan population, that was an easy task. But partitioning a region, say Punjab or Bengal, and drawing a line in the middle of it where half of the people would go on one side, half on the other side, that was a really complicated task. But it all had to be done eventually because there was no other option. Both sides wanted it. Both sides wanted Punjab. Both sides wanted Bengal. So the only option left was to divide them. And regarding the princely states, first Mountbatten came up with a plan that we should give them independence and whatever they want to do, they should have that freedom. But Nehru wasn't particularly happy with this idea, and he was quite furious and angry when he heard this. And eventually, these two came to an agreement where it was agreed upon that these princely states wouldn't have all the freedom. They eventually had to join either India or Pakistan. And eventually it was ensured that at least 550 of these, around 560, 565 princely states, that they had gone one way or the other, whether they had joined India or Pakistan. There was still that some of them were left, and those disputes were resolved later, like Kashmir, Hyderabad. These states still remained, but most of them, they were put into either India or Pakistan. It also made sense for a lot of these princely states and their rulers to join either of these countries because remember, this was 20th century, and in a lot of places many revolutions were taking place, communism was taking hold, and the same thing happened in the regions of Hyderabad, where there was some kind of taxation and people started protesting. So everywhere there was some kind of protests going on, and the rulers of these states, they knew that they were not going to control the region without the help of a bigger stable state for a long time, and that's where they had to eventually accede to either of these two unions, India or Pakistan. But even then, there were a lot of discussions, a lot of conspiracies going on. For example, Manipur, the state that we have today in the northeast, it was considering to merge with Burma. And then there was the state of Travancore, which was probably thinking not to join India, but maybe Pakistan, maybe Afghanistan. All these things, they were going on in the heads of these rulers. But eventually, one way or the other, India found a way to control most of these princely states that were part of these mainland India. On the other hand, Pakistan was able to take control of Balochistan, which was not entirely under Pakistan's control in the beginning. So all of this was finalized, and yet the tragedy of all of it was when all of this was going on, negotiations taking place, lines were being drawn on the maps. People on the ground, while there were a lot of them still participating in violence, still didn't know what India meant and what Pakistan meant, where exactly were the lines. And in fact, what the British did, and they did it horribly, that they did not tell the common public what the exact lines were until the partition happened. And in fact, many days after that, people got to learn which side was their village lying on, whether it was now a part of India or a part of Pakistan. Especially, I'm talking about in the provinces of Punjab and Bengal. So that meant more confusion and more violence. And in all of this, violence was beyond all measures. People had to leave their homes because a lot of Muslims, they traveled from India to Pakistan, and then a lot of Hindus and Sikhs, they traveled, left their homes from Pakistan to India. In fact, in most cases, they didn't want to do that, but they had to because the neighbors had turned against them and they had no other choice. They were just fleeing for their lives. The British, what they did, they just ran away, leaving behind all this mess for the two nations and their leaders to share. And that's really the story, brief story of the partition of India and Pakistan. So that's it for today's episode. I'll catch you the next time and I'll continue the story of the partition of British India with the help of Sam Dalrymple's book. So I hope I'll catch you the next time. Thank you so much for listening. Thank you.